The
BP is dropping. We need to intubate now. Airway is clear. Tube ready. Good. On my count.
Vital stable for now.
Cart's ready.
As 8 physicians crowded around the hospital bed where 6-year-old Emma Chen convulsed, her small body rigid against the sterile sheets. The chief of neurology barked orders above the cacophony of beeping monitors, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years' experience. Prepare phenytoin. This is acute epilepsy, people. Move. In the corner of the room, a man in faded blue maintenance coveralls pushed a yellow cleaning cart slowly across the linoleum. His presence so unremarkable that not one of the frantic physicians registered his existence. Daniel Walker was 40 years old, though the silver threading through his brown hair and the permanent exhaustion etched around his blue eyes made him appear older. His hands gripped the mop handle with deliberate steadiness as he watched the medical team struggle, his jaw tightening with each passing second. The attending physician fumbled with the IV line while a resident called out vitals that meant nothing without the correct context. Daniel's lips moved soundlessly, forming words no one could hear over the noise. "This isn't epilepsy." Emma's mother stood frozen against the far wall, her face drained of color as she watched her daughter's life slip away in real time. The monitors showed heart rate climbing, oxygen saturation dropping, and still the physicians debated dosages and protocols while precious minutes evaporated. Daniel's grip on the mop handle tightened until his knuckles went white. He had spent 10 years making himself invisible, 10 years perfecting the art of being overlooked, 10 years learning to keep his mouth shut even when everything inside him screamed to intervene. But this child, this terrified little girl whose symptoms he recognized in the first 30 seconds, was dying because 8 trained physicians couldn't see what was blindingly obvious to anyone who knew where to look. The words escaped before he could stop them. "Excuse me." No one turned. The chief of neurology continued barking orders while the resident struggled to stabilize the IV port. Daniel stepped away from his cart, his voice firmer now. "I think you should check for allergic encephalitis." 8 heads swiveled toward him as if choreographed. The silence that followed was so complete that Emma's labored breathing became the only sound in the room. The chief of neurology stared at him with the kind of withering contempt reserved for those who dare challenge medical hierarchy. His badge read, "Dr. Marcus Hunt. Did the janitor just diagnose my patient? The symptoms indicate acute allergic reaction, not epilepsy. The presentation is wrong. Facial asymmetry. The specific pattern of the seizures, the sudden onset following medication administration this morning, it all points to encephalitis triggered by an allergic response." Dr. Hunt's face flushed red. "Get this man out of my exam room before I have security remove him." But a younger physician, a woman with dark circles under her eyes and a resident's badge identifying her as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, was staring at Daniel with an expression that mixed confusion with something else, recognition perhaps, or desperate hope. "Wait." Sarah moved closer to Emma, examining the child's face with new eyes. "There is asymmetry, left side subtle but present. And look at the rash pattern on her chest, barely visible under the monitors." Dr. Hunt opened his mouth to object, but Sarah was already pulling up Emma's medical chart on the tablet. "She started a new antibiotic this morning, 8 hours ago. The timing fits." "That's coincidence, not causation. We don't take diagnostic advice from maintenance staff." Sarah ignored him, her fingers flying across the screen. "We need to run a complete allergen panel and check inflammatory markers. If this is allergic encephalitis and we treat it as epilepsy, we could trigger anaphylaxis with the phenytoin." Emma's body went rigid again, another convulsion racking her small frame. Her mother let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. Dr. Hunt looked from Sarah to Emma to Daniel, and something in his expression shifted. Not acceptance, but calculation. The awareness that if this child died on his watch while ignoring a potential alternative diagnosis, the liability would be crushing. "Fine, run the tests. But this man leaves. Now." Daniel was already backing toward his cart when Emma's oxygen saturation alarm shrieked. Sarah's hands moved with practiced speed, adjusting medications, calling for the allergen panel, coordinating with the lab technicians who materialized from nowhere. Within 20 minutes, the results came back positive for severe allergic reaction to the antibiotic. Within 40 minutes, Emma was stable, breathing normally, her small face relaxed in medicated sleep. Her mother collapsed into a chair, weeping with relief. Daniel had returned to mopping the hallway outside when he felt eyes on him. Sarah Mitchell stood in the doorway, her scrubs rumpled and sweat-stained, but her gaze sharp and assessing. "Who are you?" "Just someone trying to finish his shift, doctor." Janitors don't know medical terminology. They don't recognize differential diagnoses for rare conditions. They don't save lives. Daniel pushed his cart forward, but Sarah blocked his path. "I'm going to find out who you are." The voiceover from Daniel's internal monologue had been running since the moment he'd opened his mouth in that conference room, a stream of regret and resignation. They didn't know that 10 years ago I stood where they stood. They didn't know I'd published 47 papers on pediatric neurology before my 31st birthday. They didn't know that Boston Children's Hospital had offered me department chair at 32. They didn't know that one decision, one catastrophic failure born of exhaustion and grief, had ended everything. And today, I couldn't stay silent. Today I watched that little girl dying, and every instinct I'd tried to bury for a decade clawed its way to the surface. Maybe some debts can never be paid, maybe some guilt never fades. But I couldn't let another child die, not when I knew, not again. Daniel's apartment in East Hartford was a study in deliberate minimalism. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for a single person, and a living room furnished with items from second-hand stores. The walls were bare, except for a single framed photograph of a teenage girl with his same blue eyes, her smile bright and uncomplicated in the way only a 15-year-old's could be. Chloe, his daughter, his reason for everything. The clock on the microwave read 6:47 p.m. as Daniel heated leftover pasta and settled onto the worn couch. Jeopardy would start in 13 minutes, the same routine he'd followed for the better part of a decade. Stability. Predictability. A life measured in 8-hour shifts and weekly video calls with the only person who mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. We need to talk." "Tomorrow 7 a.m. coffee shop across from the hospital." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The past had a way of reaching for you when you least expected it, but he'd become expert at keeping it at arm's length. The doorbell rang, which was unusual enough to make him tense. No one visited him. No one knew where he lived beyond the hospital's HR department. Through the peephole, he saw a man in an expensive suit, late 50s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Daniel recognized him immediately from hospital leadership meetings he'd observed while cleaning conference rooms. Dr. James Rodriguez, Chief of Medicine. Opening the door felt like stepping off a cliff. "Mr. Walker, may I come in?" The apartment's shabbiness seemed magnified by Rodriguez's presence, the contrast between their worlds stark and uncomfortable. Rodriguez settled onto the couch without waiting for invitation, his gaze taking in the sparse surroundings with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. "You saved Emma Chen's life today." "I suggested an alternative diagnosis. Dr. Mitchell did the actual saving." "Don't be modest. 8 physicians missed it. You saw it in seconds." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Who are you?" The question hung between them like a blade. Daniel could lie, deflect, maintain the fiction he'd constructed, but something in Rodriguez's eyes suggested he already knew or had guessed enough to make lying pointless. "I used to be a doctor, a long time ago." "How long?" 10 years. I let my license lapse. Personal reasons." Rodriguez pulled out his phone, typed something, then turned the screen toward Daniel. It showed a publication from 2013 Journal of Pediatric Neurology, lead author Dr. Daniel Walker, Boston Children's Hospital. 47 publications before you turned 31. You were being groomed for chief resident. Then you vanished. No forwarding address, no explanation, just gone. Rodriguez pocketed his phone. "Why work as a janitor?" Regular hours, 7 to 3. No on-call, no emergencies at midnight, no life-or-death decisions. Daniel met his gaze. I have a daughter in San Diego. We video call every Sunday at 7 p.m. I haven't missed one in 10 years. That matters more than anything else. What happened in Boston? The memory rose unbidden, sharp and terrible even after a decade. Tyler Brennan's face, 19 years old, bright with potential, believing absolutely in Daniel's competence. The CT scan with its subtle shadow that Daniel had dismissed as artifact because he was too exhausted, too grief-stricken from his recent divorce, too drunk on cheap whiskey every night to see clearly. 3 weeks later, Tyler was dead from a brain tumor that had been visible all along, if only Daniel had looked harder. I made a mistake. Someone died because of it. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. The hospital needs a medical consultant. Part-time, 20 hours a week. You'd review complex cases, offer second opinions, teach residents, $65 an hour. No license required. It's purely an advisory role. No. You just saved a child's life. And 10 years ago I failed to save someone else's. The answer is no. Rodriguez stood, but paused at the door. Emma Chen is 6 years old. She'll grow up now. Go to school, make friends, maybe become a doctor herself. That happened because you couldn't stay silent. He pulled out a business card, set it on the narrow table by the door. Think about how many other people might live if you stopped punishing yourself for being human. The flashback arrived in fragments as Daniel lay in bed that night, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. 10 years earlier. Boston Children's Hospital. 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Daniel's office was a disaster of medical journals and patient files, empty coffee cups creating a scattered archaeology of his day. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Laura, his wife, but he'd been in surgery, and then consults, and then the Hopkins Review Board meeting had run late. His daughter Chloe's 6th birthday party had started at 5 p.m. When he finally made it home at 11:30, the apartment was dark, except for the nightlight in Chloe's room. Laura stood in the hallway, still in the dress she'd worn for the party, mascara streaked down her face. She waited for you, wouldn't let anyone cut the cake, sat at the table for 3 hours asking when Daddy was coming. There was a case, a complicated case. I couldn't leave. You could have. Dr. Peterson offered to cover. You chose not to. Daniel had no answer for that because it was true. He'd chosen the case over the party the same way he'd chosen work over family 100 times before, always telling himself it was temporary, that things would slow down, that once he made chief resident, he could delegate more. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't teach our daughter that she matters. Sorry doesn't explain why her father cares more about strangers than his own child. In her bedroom, Chloe slept clutching a homemade invitation card, Daddy's Little Princess Party. The crayon drawing showed a stick figure, father holding hands with a stick figure daughter under a rainbow. Laura's voice was flat when she spoke again. I can't do this anymore. Chloe deserves a father who shows up. Since you can't be that person, I'm taking her somewhere she won't have to keep being disappointed. Laura, please. I filed for divorce yesterday. We're moving to San Diego next month. My mother has space for us. The world tilted. Daniel gripped the doorframe to steady himself. You can't take her across the country. I can, and I am. You'll get visitation. 1 weekend a month, 3 weeks in summer. Maybe when you're not trying to be father of the year, you won't disappoint her quite so much. 3 months after the divorce, Daniel was living alone in a studio apartment, working 90-hour weeks because the alternative was sitting in silence with his guilt. Chloe's first video call from San Diego had lasted 47 minutes, and she'd spent most of it crying. Daddy, why don't you want to live with me? The question had shattered something inside him that never fully healed. 6 months after the divorce, Tyler Brennan walked into his office complaining of recurring headaches. 19 years old, MIT sophomore, brilliant kid studying aerospace engineering. The symptoms were consistent with migraine exacerbated by stress. Daniel had seen 100 cases just like it. He'd ordered a CT scan anyway, standard protocol, and reviewed it himself because that's what good doctors did. The shadow in the left temporal lobe was small, barely visible, the kind of artifact that showed up in 5% of scans and meant nothing 99% of the time. Daniel had noted it in the file minor density variation likely artifact, clinically insignificant. He'd prescribed medication for migraines and sent Tyler home with instructions to return if symptoms worsened. 3 weeks later, Tyler collapsed during a lecture. The ambulance rushed him to Mass General, where the ER physicians found the brain tumor that had been growing unchecked already, stage 4, already metastasized beyond any hope of surgical intervention. Tyler died 10 days after that. His mother, Mrs. Brennan, had come to Daniel's office afterward. She hadn't screamed or threatened legal action. She'd simply stood there, her face aged a decade in 10 days, and asked the question that would haunt him forever. "My son trusted you. Why didn't you save him?" The malpractice review had cleared Daniel of wrongdoing. The shadow on the CT scan was genuinely ambiguous. Tyler's symptoms had been consistent with migraine. No protocol had been violated. The hospital stood behind him, offered him a promotion to associate chief resident, assured him these tragedies happened, and he'd done nothing wrong. But Daniel knew the truth. He'd looked at that shadow and dismissed it because he was exhausted from 80-hour weeks, because he was drinking himself to sleep every night, because the divorce had hollowed him out and left him operating on autopilot. A physician at full capacity would have ordered follow-up imaging. A physician who wasn't drowning in grief and self-medication would have caught it. Tyler Brennan died because Daniel Walker had been too broken to see clearly. The night after Mrs. Brennan's visit, Daniel wrote his resignation letter. He let his medical license lapse. He withdrew his savings, left Boston without telling anyone, and started over in Hartford, Connecticut, 300 miles from his old life. He found work as a janitor because the hours were fixed and the job required nothing but showing up. No lives hung in the balance, no split-second decisions, no chance to fail someone else's child. And he'd kept that promise to himself for 10 years, until today. Sunday arrived with the weight of routine. Daniel cleaned his apartment, bought groceries, prepared for his weekly call with Chloe. At 6:55 p.m., he settled onto the couch with his laptop, checking the connection 3 times before the clock hit 7. Chloe's face filled the screen at 7:01, her smile immediate and bright. "Dad, guess what happened in Biolab this week?" For the next hour they talked. Chloe described her genetics project on inherited diseases, her excitement palpable as she explained Punnett squares and dominant alleles. She'd been accepted into a national science competition. Her AP biology teacher thought she had real potential for medical school. "You'd make an incredible doctor, honey." "Like Grandpa Daniel, right? The one you were named after?" The lie sat heavy in his throat. His father had been an accountant dead from a heart attack when Daniel was 12. He'd invented the story about a physician grandfather years ago when Chloe asked why he knew so much about medicine despite working as a janitor. The truth that her father had once been the doctor she aspired to become seemed too complicated, too painful. Just like him. "Dad, do you ever regret it? Not finishing college? You're so smart. You read all those medical journals. You could have done more." The question cut deeper than Chloe could know. "I have you, sweetheart. That's more than enough." But after the call ended, her words echoed. "You could have done more." Rodriguez's business card still sat on the table by the door. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Daniel clocked in at 6:58 a.m., collected his cart from the maintenance closet, and began his rounds on the second floor. The routine was soothing in its predictability, each task mechanical and simple. At 7:15, his supervisor approached with unusual urgency. "Walker, Dr. Rodriguez wants to see you. His office now." The walk to the administrative wing felt like approaching an execution. Rodriguez's office occupied a corner with views of downtown Hartford, the furniture expensive and the walls lined with diplomas and awards. The man himself sat behind a massive desk, but he wasn't alone. Sarah Mitchell stood by the window, still in her scrubs from an overnight shift. "Mr. Walker, please sit." Daniel remained standing. I need to get back to work. I know who you are. Sarah's voice carried no accusation, only weary determination. Took me 3 days of searching publication databases, but I found your work. 47 papers. Groundbreaking research on pediatric seizure disorders. You were being fast-tracked for department chair at Boston Children's Hospital. That was a long time ago. 10 years. Then you vanished. No explanation, no forwarding information. Just gone. She moved closer. What happened? Rodriguez answered before Daniel could. I called Boston Children's, spoke with their current chief of staff. He remembers you, said you were the most talented diagnostician he'd ever trained, said your resignation was unexpected and that you'd been cleared of any wrongdoing in a patient death. The walls felt like they were closing in. I don't want this conversation. Emma Chen would be dead if not for you. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion but fierce with conviction. You saw what 8 of us missed. That's not luck. That's skill training experience. And 10 years ago I missed something obvious because I was too burnt out to see straight. A 19-year-old kid died. So yes, I was cleared legally, but I know what I did, or failed to do. The silence that followed felt bottomless. Rodriguez spoke carefully. Burnout kills more physicians than malpractice. The system grinds people down. You're not the first doctor to make a mistake while running on empty. That doesn't bring Tyler Brennan back. No, but hiding from medicine doesn't honor his memory either. It just ensures that all the patients you could have saved never get that chance. Daniel turned to leave, but Sarah's next words stopped him. My father was a firefighter. He died in the North Tower on September 11th. I was 12. He turned back. He ran into that building knowing he might not come out. For years I was angry. Angry that he chose strangers over his family, that he left us, that he didn't turn around when he had the chance. Her voice cracked slightly. But he couldn't turn around. He couldn't watch people die when he had the skills to help. It's not about being a hero. It's about not being able to live with yourself if you do nothing. That's different. Is it, you saw Emma Chen dying. You couldn't stay silent. That instinct, that inability to watch someone suffer when you know the answer, that's who you are. 10 years of mopping floors didn't kill it. The offer came Wednesday morning via formal letter delivered to his apartment. Medical consultant, Riverside Medical Center, 20 hours per week, flexible scheduling, $65 per hour, no direct patient care, purely advisory capacity, no medical license required for the role, though reinstatement would be encouraged. Daniel threw the letter in the trash, then retrieved it an hour later. Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., his phone rang. Rodriguez apologetic and desperate. I know you said no, but we have a 16-year-old in the ER. Seizures, altered mental status. 3 attendings are stumped. She's crashing, please. The drive to the hospital took 18 minutes. Daniel left his apartment in sweatpants and a hoodie, not bothering with shoes beyond the slip-ons by the door. The ER was controlled chaos when he arrived. A teenage girl lay on a gurney, her body seizing despite maximum anti-seizure medication. 3 physicians argued over treatment protocols while her vitals deteriorated on the monitors. Daniel pushed through the crowd, his eyes scanning the chart someone thrust at him. Ashley Morgan, 16 years old, sophomore at a San Diego high school. The coincidence registered dimly the same age and grade as Chloe. The symptoms crystallized in his mind within seconds. Seizures, confusion, facial twitching, fever of 101.3, sudden onset 6 hours prior. You need to test for anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. Dr. Hunt, who Daniel now recognized as a permanent fixture of neurology, rounded on him. Who the hell authorized janitorial staff in my ER? I did. Rodriguez materialized from somewhere, his voice carrying absolute authority. What are you thinking, Daniel? Anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. It's rare, but the presentation is textbook. Seizures that don't respond to standard medication, psychiatric symptoms, autonomic instability. If I'm right, she needs immunotherapy within the next 6 hours or she'll have permanent brain damage. Hunt's face flushed crimson. You're taking diagnostic advice from a janitor. I'm taking advice from someone who sees what we're missing. Sarah appeared beside Daniel, pulling up diagnostic criteria on her tablet. He's right. The progression, the medication resistance, it all fits. We should run the antibody test. Based on a custodian's hunch, Daniel stepped forward close enough to see the fear underlying Hunt's bluster. I'm not a custodian. I'm Dr. Daniel Walker, formerly of Boston Children's Hospital. I spent 10 years as chief resident. I published 47 papers on pediatric neurology, and I'm telling you that if you dose this girl with standard epilepsy medication and she has anti-NMDA encephalitis, you will trigger a cascade that will kill her before morning. The silence was absolute. Hunt opened his mouth, closed it, then turned to Rodriguez. This is your call. Run the test. Start empiric immunotherapy now. We'll confirm later. 6 hours later, Ashley Morgan's antibody tests came back positive. The immunotherapy stabilized her. By morning, she was conscious, confused, but alive. Daniel was halfway home when his phone buzzed. A text from Chloe marked urgent. Dad, emergency. Call me now. His heart stopped. He pulled over, hands shaking as he dialed. Chloe answered on the first ring, her voice thick with tears. Ashley Morgan. She's my friend. My best friend from sophomore year. Her mom just called my mom. She said there was a doctor who saved Ashley. Dr. Daniel Walker. The pause felt infinite. Dad, that's you. That's your name. The world tilted sideways. Chloe, sweetheart, I can explain. You lied to me for 10 years. You said you were a janitor. You said you dropped out of college. You said Grandpa Daniel was the doctor. I didn't want you to think I was weak for walking away. I didn't want you to know I failed. Failed how you saved Ashley. You saved my best friend. But before that, I killed someone. A patient. I missed a diagnosis because I was too exhausted and too broken to see clearly. He died. I couldn't practice medicine anymore, knowing I might fail again. Chloe's crying intensified. You lied about who you are. For my whole life. I thought you were honest. I thought you were the one person who never lied. Chloe, please. The line went dead. Daniel sat in his car on the side of Route 2 as dawn broke over Hartford, his phone showing the disconnected call, and wept for the first time in 10 years. 3 days passed without contact. Chloe didn't answer calls. Text messages went unanswered. Laura finally responded on day 4 with a terse message, give her time. But time felt like drowning. On Friday, Rodriguez found Daniel cleaning the cafeteria at 2 p.m., an hour before his shift ended. She'll forgive you. You don't know that. I know that Ashley Morgan is alive. I know that Emma Chen goes home tomorrow fully recovered. I know that you can't keep running from who you are. Daniel squeezed water from the mop with more force than necessary. Who I am got someone killed. Who you are saved 2 children this week, maybe more if you stop hiding. Rodriguez pulled out a folder, set it on a nearby table. Formal offer, medical consultant position. You'd need to reinstate your license, which means dealing with the Connecticut Medical Board. They'll want to know about Boston, about Tyler Brennan. It won't be easy. Then why would I do it? Because Chloe needs to see that failure isn't final, that you can face your mistakes and still move forward. Right now, she thinks you're a coward who ran away. Prove her wrong. The folder sat unopened for 2 hours after Rodriguez left. Then Daniel read it. Then he called the number listed for license reinstatement. The woman who answered identified herself as Dr. Barbara Whitmore, Connecticut Medical Board investigator. Dr. Walker, we've been expecting your call. I've reviewed your file from Boston. We'll need to schedule a formal hearing to discuss the circumstances of your license lapse and the patient death that preceded it. Next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Be prepared to answer detailed questions. I'll be there. After hanging up, Daniel sat in the empty cafeteria surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaner and institutional food, and wondered if redemption was something you could earn or just something you pretended was possible. His phone buzzed. Sarah Mitchell, Sunday morning, 8 a.m. There's a patient case I need your eyes on. Meet me in conference room 3B. He shouldn't go. He should finish his notice leave. Hartford start over somewhere else where the past couldn't find him. But he thought of Emma Chen alive, Ashley Morgan recovering, Chloe's voice asking why he'd lied. And he thought of Tyler Brennan, 19 years old, dead because Daniel had been too broken to see. Maybe there was a way forward that honored both the living and the dead. Maybe working part-time with boundaries and support, he could use what he knew without destroying himself again. Or maybe he was fooling himself, and this would end in disaster. Either way, Sunday at 8 a.m. he'd find out. Sunday morning arrived with unseasonable cold November's grip tightening on Hartford as Daniel drove to Riverside Medical Center at 7:43 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a scattering of vehicles belonging to weekend staff and the unfortunate souls whose emergencies couldn't wait for Monday. Conference room 3B occupied a corner of the 4th floor, its windows overlooking the Connecticut River. Sarah Mitchell was already there, surrounded by patient files and a laptop displaying CT scans that made Daniel's chest constrict with recognition of complexity. "Thanks for coming. You didn't give me much choice." Sarah gestured to the chair across from her, but Daniel remained standing, keeping distance between himself and the medical imagery that pulled at something deep in his chest. Sophia Turner, 14 years old. Progressive headaches for 3 months, vision problems for 6 weeks. Now she's losing peripheral sight in both eyes. Parents brought her to ophthalmology first, then neurology. Dr. Hunt ordered an MRI. She pulled up the scan. Daniel's trained eye caught the abnormality immediately, the subtle swelling in the pituitary region that Hunt had apparently interpreted as tumor. Hunt wants to do exploratory brain surgery. Open her skull, biopsy the mass, possibly remove it depending on what they find. When? Tuesday. Parents are terrified, but they trust him. He's chief of neurology after all. Daniel moved closer to the screen, despite himself zooming the image to examine the specific pattern of the swelling. "What do you think it is?" The diagnosis formed with the same certainty he'd felt with Emma Chen, with Ashley Morgan, the pattern recognition that 10 years away from medicine hadn't dulled. Lymphocytic hypophysitis, autoimmune inflammation of the pituitary gland. It mimics tumor presentation on imaging, but it's not cancer. You treat it with corticosteroids, not surgery. You're sure? Run a hormone panel. Check prolactin, TSH, cortisol, LH-FSH. If I'm right, they'll all be abnormal in a specific pattern. Inflammation disrupts hormone production. That's why she's having vision problems. The swelling is pressing on the optic chiasm, but cutting into her brain is the worst possible approach. Sarah typed notes rapidly. "Hunt will fight me on this. He's already scheduled the OR. Then get Rodriguez involved. Show him the evidence. A 14-year-old girl doesn't need brain surgery for something that responds to medication. Will you talk to the parents? Explain it to them." The request landed like a physical blow. Talking to parents meant stepping fully back into medicine, meant accepting responsibility for outcomes, meant risking failure again. "I'm not her doctor. But you know what she needs. Hunt is wrong, Daniel. You know it. I know it. Are you going to let her get unnecessary surgery because you're afraid?" The words stung precisely because they were accurate. Monday morning brought a formal letter from the Connecticut Medical Board confirming Wednesday's hearing at 10 a.m. Daniel read it 3 times each pass, heightening the anxiety coiling in his gut. They wanted documentation from Boston Children's Hospital, details of the Tyler Brennan case, explanation for why his license had lapsed rather than being voluntarily surrendered. Laura called at 11:20 a.m., her voice tight with controlled anger. "Chloe told me everything. You were a doctor. You let me believe you were just a janitor who never finished college." "I never said I didn't finish college. You assumed." "Don't split hairs with me. You lied by omission for 10 years. About who you are, what you did, why you're in Hartford instead of San Diego." "I was trying to protect her." "From what?" "From knowing her father is intelligent and skilled, from understanding that people make mistakes and survive them." "You weren't protecting Chloe. You were protecting yourself from having to explain your choices. The accusation cut deep because truth lived in it. How is she? Angry, hurt. She feels betrayed. And honestly, Daniel, I don't blame her. Our daughter spent 10 years thinking you were a failure when actually you were running from your own guilt. That's worse. I never called myself a failure. You didn't have to. She saw you mopping floors and drew her own conclusions. Now she knows you threw away a brilliant career and she doesn't understand why. Because I killed someone, Laura. Because Tyler Brennan trusted me and I failed him and he died. That's why. Silence stretched across the phone connection. When Laura spoke again, her voice had softened fractionally. The hospital here called me. Ashley's mother told everyone that a Dr. Daniel Walker saved her daughter's life. The same Dr. Walker who apparently saved another child named Emma Chen 2 weeks ago. So you're not just mopping floors anymore, are you? Rodriguez offered me a consultant position, part-time. I haven't accepted. Why not? Because what if I'm wrong again? What if I miss something and someone else dies? Then you'll have made a mistake, like every other doctor who ever practiced medicine. But at least you'll be using your gifts instead of wasting them. After she hung up, Daniel sat motionless for 20 minutes, the silence of his apartment pressing down like physical weight. Tuesday morning, Danielle arrived at the hospital to find Sarah waiting by the maintenance office, her expression grim. Hunt refused to run the hormone panel, said it was unnecessary delay before surgery. Sophia goes under the knife tomorrow at 7 a.m. Did you talk to Rodriguez? He's in Philadelphia for a medical conference, won't be back until Thursday. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then go over Hunt's head, call the hospital board, show them the imaging, and explain the alternative diagnosis. They'll ask who suggested it. When I say you, they'll ask about your credentials. You're not currently licensed. You're not on staff. Why would they listen? The trap closed around him with elegant simplicity. He could watch Sophia Turner undergo unnecessary brain surgery, or he could step forward and fight for her, which meant exposing himself fully, meant accepting consequences, meant ending his decade of hiding. Where are her parents? Waiting room on the 3rd floor. The walk felt interminable. Mr. and Mrs. Turner sat side by side, their hands clasped together with the desperate unity of people facing catastrophe. Mrs. Turner's eyes were red-rimmed. Mr. Turner had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Daniel introduced himself as a medical consultant, which was technically accurate, even if misleading by omission. Dr. Mitchell asked me to review your daughter's case. I have concerns about the proposed surgery. Mr. Turner straightened. What kind of concerns? The imaging shows pituitary swelling, which Dr. Hunt interpreted as possible tumor. But there's an alternative explanation. Lymphocytic hypophysitis, an autoimmune condition where the body attacks the pituitary gland. It causes the same swelling, the same vision problems, but it responds to steroid medication. Surgery isn't just unnecessary, it carries significant risks. Brain surgery always does. Mrs. Turner's voice shook. Doctor, Hunt said surgery was the only option, that without it Sophia could go blind. She could go blind from the inflammation, yes, but medication treats the inflammation. Surgery doesn't. Surgery removes tissue, which in this case isn't the problem. How do we know which diagnosis is correct? Blood tests, a comprehensive hormone panel. If it's hypophysitis, the hormones will show a specific pattern of disruption. The test takes 4 hours. If I'm wrong, surgery proceeds as planned tomorrow. If I'm right, you avoid putting your daughter through an operation she doesn't need. Mr. Turner looked at his wife, some wordless communication passing between them. Why didn't Dr. Hunt mention this possibility? You'd have to ask him. But I can tell you that lymphocytic hypophysitis is rare. Many physicians never see a case in their entire career. It's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Mrs. Turner wiped her eyes. Can we talk to Dr. Hunt about running these tests? You can demand them. You're her parents. You have the right to request additional diagnostics before surgery. The confrontation came 90 minutes later in Hunt's office. Daniel had returned to his maintenance duties, mopping the 2nd floor hallway, when Sarah found him with urgency written across her face. Hunt wants to see you, Now, he's furious. Hunt's office was smaller than Rodriguez's but decorated with enough diplomas and awards to make his credentials unmistakable. The man himself stood behind his desk, his face flushed with anger that radiated like heat. "You went behind my back to my patient's family. You undermined my diagnosis and questioned my competence. I offered an alternative explanation for their daughter's symptoms. They asked questions. I answered. You have no authority here. You're not licensed. You're not on staff. You're a janitor playing doctor, and it ends now." Sarah stepped forward. "The Turners requested the hormone panel, as is their right. The tests are running. Because Walker convinced them I'm incompetent. No one said that. But Sophia deserves a complete workup before brain surgery. If the tests confirm tumor surgery proceeds. If they show hypophysitis, we treat medically. Either way, we have a definitive answer." Hunt's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I know who you are, Walker. I looked you up after the Emma Chen case. You were at Boston Children's 10 years ago. You had a patient die. Malpractice investigation. You quit rather than face consequences. I was cleared of malpractice, and I quit because I knew the truth even if the board didn't. The truth being that I missed a brain tumor because I was too exhausted and too broken to see clearly. Tyler Brennan was 19 years old. He trusted me. I failed him." Hunt's expression shifted, anger giving way to something uglier, satisfaction at exposed weakness. "And now you're here unlicensed advising on cases overriding board-certified physicians. What happens when you're wrong again? When another patient dies because the janitor thought he knew better than real doctors? Then I'll live with that, same as I've lived with Tyler for 10 years. But I won't stay silent and watch Sophia Turner get brain surgery she doesn't need. Get out of my office. Get out of this hospital. If I see you anywhere near my patients again, I'll have you arrested for practicing medicine without a license." Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "He hasn't practiced medicine. He offered an opinion. The Turners requested tests based on that opinion. That's not illegal." "It's close enough. And when Rodriguez gets back, I'm filing a formal complaint with the hospital board. Walker's done here." The hormone panel results arrived at 4:47 p.m. Daniel was cleaning the cafeteria when Sarah found him, her phone screen showing lab values that confirmed everything he'd suspected. Prolactin elevated, TSH abnormal, cortisol dysregulated, the exact pattern of pituitary inflammation. "You were right. Lymphocytic hypophysitis. The endocrinologist confirmed it." Relief and vindication mixed with something darker, the knowledge that being right had consequences beyond Sophia's health. Hunt's going to escalate this. Let him. Sophia doesn't need surgery. Her parents are grateful. That matters more than Hunt's ego. But Wednesday's medical board hearing arrived with a weight that gratitude couldn't offset. Dr. Barbara Whitmore conducted the proceedings from behind a desk in a windowless conference room, her expression professionally neutral as she reviewed documentation from Boston. "Dr. Walker, you allowed your Connecticut medical license to lapse 10 years ago after leaving Boston Children's Hospital. According to records, you were involved in a patient death that resulted in malpractice investigation. The investigation cleared you of wrongdoing, yet you resigned immediately afterward and ceased practicing medicine. Can you explain this timeline?" Daniel had prepared for this question, but preparation didn't make honesty easier. "Tyler Brennan presented with recurring headaches. I ordered a CT scan. There was a shadow on the scan, subtle but present. I noted it in his file but concluded it was artifact not clinically significant. 3 weeks later he collapsed. The shadow was a brain tumor, stage 4, already metastasized. He died 10 days after diagnosis. The malpractice review found no protocol violation. The tumor presentation was ambiguous. Your clinical judgment was within acceptable standards." "Acceptable standards aren't the same as good medicine. I missed it because I was running on 4 hours of sleep, because I'd just gone through a divorce, because I was drinking too much and functioning on autopilot. A better version of myself would have ordered follow-up imaging, would have been more cautious, would have saved him." Whitmore made notes on her tablet. "You're holding yourself to an impossible standard. Physicians aren't machines. Personal circumstances affect performance. That's why burnout is recognized as a systemic problem in medicine. Burnout is an explanation, not an excuse. Tyler Brennan is still dead. And 10 years later, you're still punishing yourself by working as a janitor. That seems excessive. It seemed necessary. I couldn't trust myself with lives anymore. Yet you've recently provided medical consultation on at least 2 cases at Riverside Medical Center. Emma Chen and Ashley Morgan, both children who would likely have died without your intervention. That suggests your clinical skills remain sharp, or suggests I got lucky twice. Dr. Mitchell's report indicates you correctly diagnosed lymphocytic hypophysitis in a 14-year-old patient, preventing unnecessary brain surgery. 3 correct diagnoses in 2 weeks. That's not luck, Dr. Walker. That's expertise. The hearing continued for 90 minutes. Whitmore probing every aspect of his decision to leave medicine, his life in Hartford, his recent return to consultation. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. Here's my recommendation. You complete 60 hours of continuing medical education within the next 60 days. You undergo 6 months of probationary supervision under Dr. Rodriguez. You participate in mandatory counseling regarding burnout prevention and work-life balance. If you fulfill these requirements, your license will be reinstated. That's it. You made one mistake a decade ago while suffering from documented burnout and personal crisis. You've shown remorse, taken responsibility, and demonstrated that your clinical skills haven't deteriorated. The board's job isn't to punish you forever. It's to ensure patient safety. I believe you can practice medicine safely with appropriate support structures. Daniel left the hearing in a daze, the next 6 hours passing in a blur of CME registration and probation paperwork. By evening, he'd committed to a path he'd sworn never to walk again. His phone rang at 9:17 p.m. Rodriguez calling from Philadelphia. Whitmore called me. You're reinstated pending probation. Congratulations. Hunt filed a complaint against me. I know. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday. Hunt claims you're practicing without a license, undermining attendings, creating liability risks. He's not wrong about the undermining part. No, but he is wrong about Sophia Turner. You prevented a medical error. That should count for something. It won't if the board sides with Hunt. Then we make sure they don't. The Turners are willing to testify. So are Emma Chen's parents. Ashley Morgan's mother flew in from San Diego. She wants to speak on your behalf. The mention of San Diego triggered recognition. Ashley's mother knows Laura. They're friends. Did Laura tell you to involve her? Laura suggested it might help. She seems to think you're worth fighting for, even if she's still angry about the lying. After hanging up, Daniel pulled up his text history with Chloe. The last message, sent 5 days ago, remained unanswered. I'm sorry. I love you. Please talk to me. The silence was its own answer. Kid. Thursday and Friday disappeared into a grinding routine of maintenance work during the day and online CME courses at night. 60 hours of education in 60 days meant averaging an hour per day on top of his 40-hour work week, a pace that was manageable but exhausting. By Friday evening, he'd completed 8 hours of coursework on pediatric neurology, advances, his eyes burning from screen time and his brain saturated with information about new treatment protocols and diagnostic criteria. The weekend should have offered respite, but Saturday brought a crisis that shattered any hope of rest. Daniel was running errands when Sarah called at 2:34 p.m., her voice pitched high with stress. I need you at the hospital, now. It's urgent. What happened? 17-year-old basketball player. Collapsed during a game. Seizure, cardiac arrest. We've been doing CPR for 4 minutes. Nobody can figure out what caused it. Call a code team. The code team is here. We need a diagnosis. Something's wrong and we can't see it. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm 20 minutes away. He might not have 20 minutes. The drive to Riverside took 16 minutes of aggressive lane changes and ignored speed limits. Daniel burst through the ER doors, still in jeans and a t-shirt, following the sound of organized chaos to Trauma Bay 3. The scene was controlled panic. A young man lay on the gurney, his skin ashen chest comprising mechanically as two nurses rotated through CPR. Monitors showed a heart rhythm that flickered between shockable and flatline. Sarah met Daniel's eyes across the controlled chaos, her expression desperate. Jake Morrison, 17, West Hartford High basketball star, no prior medical history, collapsed during practice. Witnesses say he had a brief seizure, then his heart stopped. Daniel pushed through to examine the monitors, his trained eye catching details others had missed. Has he been dehydrated? His coach said he'd been pushing hard all week, working out extra hours. Any family history of cardiac issues? We haven't reached his parents yet. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Stop CPR. The room froze. Sarah stared at him. Daniel, his heart isn't beating. And shocking it again will kill him. This is long QT syndrome, genetic cardiac condition. The dehydration and exertion triggered it. The seizure was the heart misfiring, not epilepsy. If you keep hitting him with standard defib protocols, you'll push him into permanent arrest. One of the attending physicians, younger than Hunt but equally skeptical, stepped forward. Who the hell are you to countermand code protocols? Someone who's seen this before. You need IV magnesium immediately, then correct his electrolytes, then use a modified defib protocol with lower joules. The standard approach will stop his heart permanently. Sarah grabbed a syringe. Get me magnesium sulfate. Now. The nurse hesitated, looking to the attending, who finally nodded. What followed was the longest 3 minutes of Daniel's life. Magnesium administered, electrolytes corrected, a careful measured shock at lower intensity than protocol demanded. Jake Morrison's heart rhythm stuttered, then caught, then stabilized into something approaching normal. The monitors beeped steadily. The teenager's chest rose and fell on its own. Sarah sagged against the wall, tears streaming down her face. You did it. How did you know? I didn't know. I guessed. If I was wrong, he'd be dead. The attending physician was staring at the monitors in disbelief. Long QT syndrome. I've read about it. Never seen a case. Most people haven't. It's rare, but when it hits fast. 20 minutes later, Jake's parents arrived, a middle-aged couple in work clothes. The father's hands still stained with motor oil, the mother's scrubs identifying her as a nurse from a local clinic. Their son was alive, stable, being transferred to ICU for observation. Mrs. Morrison grabbed Daniel's hands, her grip fierce. They said you saved him, that you saw what nobody else saw. I made an educated guess. You saved my son. That's more than a guess. After they'd gone to sit with Jake, Sarah found Daniel in the hallway. You need to check your email. The CME portal showed a new message. His current module exam scheduled for tonight at 8 p.m. was mandatory attendance. Missing it meant automatic failure and required retake, adding 8 hours to his 60-hour requirement. The clock on his phone showed 6:47 p.m. I have to go. I need to take that exam. Daniel, you just saved a kid's life. Surely they can reschedule. No exceptions. It's in the reinstatement terms. I miss this deadline. I fail the module. I have to redo 8 hours of coursework. He made it home by 7:23 p.m., logged into the exam portal by 7:51 p.m., and started the 2-hour assessment at 7:59 p.m. 47 minutes into the exam, his phone rang. The hospital. He ignored it. 51 minutes in, it rang again, and again, and again. At the 68-minute mark, with 32 questions remaining, someone started pounding on his apartment door. Daniel tried to ignore it, but the pounding intensified. Dr. Walker, I know you're in there. Please, it's an emergency. Abandoning the exam meant failure. Failure meant 8 additional hours of CME. 8 hours he barely had time for given his work schedule and the 30-day deadline that was rapidly becoming impossible. But the pounding continued, and the voice held genuine panic. Daniel opened the door to find Sarah, her face streaked with tears. Jake's crashing. His heart rhythm is destabilizing. We need you. We don't know what's happening. The exam portal showed 47 minutes remaining. Leaving now meant automatic failure. You have a full code team. They don't know long QT syndrome. You do. Please, Daniel. He's 17 years old. He's going to die if you don't come. The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Pass the exam and maintain his reinstatement timeline, or save Jake Morrison and add 8 hours to an already crushing workload. There was no choice. Daniel grabbed his keys and followed Sarah to her car. The return to Riverside took 11 minutes. Jake's ICU room was controlled, chaos monitors screaming alerts as his heart rhythm deteriorated despite maximum medication. The code team had already shocked him twice with no improvement. Daniel pushed through his eyes on the monitors, his mind racing through treatment options. What's his magnesium level now? Normal. We corrected it in the ER. Potassium. Also normal. The rhythm on the screen showed the characteristic long QT pattern, but something else was wrong. Some factor they were missing. What medications did you give him in the past hour? The nurse rattled off a list. Standard ICU protocols for cardiac monitoring and seizure prevention. Daniel's stomach dropped. You gave him ondansetron for nausea. That prolongs QT interval. You just made it worse. It's a standard antiemetic. Not for someone with long QT syndrome. You've got to counteract it. Increase the magnesium again. Add potassium. Even though he's technically normal, we need to shorten the QT and get cardiology down here for a temporary pacemaker consult. The next 30 minutes blurred into organized urgency. Medications adjusted, cardiology called. Jake's rhythm slowly, painfully stabilized. By the time Daniel left the hospital, it was 10:52 p.m. The CME exam had closed at 10 p.m. Automatic failure. 8 hours of required retake. His phone showed an email from the CME provider: exam incomplete. You must retake the full module. Deadline remains unchanged. The math was brutal. He'd already completed 8 hours of CME. Failing this module meant 16 total hours for material that should have taken 8. With 52 hours remaining and 29 days left in his 60-day window, he now needed to average 1.8 hours per day while working full-time. Impossible. Unless he cut sleep, stopped eating regular meals, abandoned any pretense of work-life balance, which was exactly what had destroyed him 10 years ago. Daniel sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and laughed bitterly at the irony. The reinstatement process, designed to ensure he didn't burn out, was burning him out. The system meant to protect him was breaking him. His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. Finally. Mom told me what you did for Jake, and for Ashley, and Emma. I'm still mad you lied, but I'm proud of you for going back. Can we talk Sunday at 7? The tension in his chest eased fractionally. Not forgiveness, but movement toward it. He texted back, Yes, I love you. I'm sorry. Her response came immediately. Love you too. Dad. Ted. Sunday arrived with the weight of exhaustion. Daniel had spent Saturday completing 4 hours of makeup, CME, bringing his total to 12 hours with 56 days remaining. The math was still brutal, but theoretically achievable. At 6:55 p.m., he sat on his couch with his laptop waiting for Chloe's call with the kind of nervous anticipation he hadn't felt in years. She appeared on screen at 7 p.m., exactly her expression, serious, but not hostile. Hi, Dad. Hi, sweetheart. I talked to Ashley. She told me what happened. You saved her life. Dr. Mitchell did most of the work. Stop. You saw what nobody else saw. Ashley would be dead or brain damaged if you hadn't been there. The directness of it, the lack of softening or euphemism, was pure Chloe. I'm glad I could help. Mom told me about the patient who died, Tyler. She said you've been carrying that for 10 years. Some things you don't put down. Chloe's eyes, so much like his own, held a depth of understanding that seemed impossible for 15 years. I'm not mad anymore. I mean, I'm still hurt you lied, but I understand why. You thought you were protecting me from knowing you failed. But Dad, everyone fails. What matters is what you do after. What am I supposed to do after this? What you're doing now, going back, helping people, using what you know. What if I fail again? Then you'll fail. But at least you tried. That's what you always tell me, right? Better to try and fail than never try at all. The wisdom in her words, the echo of his own parenting coming back to guide him, threatened to undo his composure entirely. You're smarter than me, you know that. I learned from the best. She smiled, tentative but genuine. So tell me about this reinstatement thing. What do you have to do? He explained the CME requirements, the probation, the 60-day deadline that had just gotten tighter. Explained how he'd failed the exam because Jake needed him. That's good though, right? You chose helping someone over a test. That's what doctors should do. Maybe. Or maybe it's the same pattern that destroyed me before. Prioritizing patients over everything else until there's nothing left. Chloe leaned closer to her camera. But you're not working 90 hours a week. You're working 20 hours plus studying. That's different. That's manageable. Is it? It has to be. Because I don't want you hiding anymore. I want my dad to be who he really is. After they hung up, Daniel sat in the silence of his apartment, turning her words over in his mind. I want my dad to be who he really is. The question was whether he knew who that person was anymore. Monday's hospital board meeting assembled at 9 a.m. in the executive conference room. 7 board members sat around a mahogany table, their faces professionally neutral. Rodriguez occupied one end, Hunt the other, his expression smugly confident. Patricia Morgan, the board chair, called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss Dr. Marcus Hunt's formal complaint regarding Daniel Walker. Dr. Hunt, please present your concerns. Hunt stood armed with documentation and righteous indignation. Daniel Walker is practicing medicine without a license. He's overriding board-certified physicians, creating liability risks and undermining patient care. He inserted himself into the Sophia Turner case, convinced her parents to refuse necessary surgery based on his unsupported diagnosis. When that case resolved, he continued interfering most recently in the Jake Morrison cardiac arrest. This pattern must stop. Patricia turned to Daniel. Mr. Walker, you're currently employed as maintenance staff. Is Dr. Hunt's characterization accurate? I provided consultation on 3 cases: Emma Chen, Ashley Morgan, and Sophia Turner. I also assisted in Jake Morrison's code because Dr. Mitchell requested my help during an emergency. In each case, I offered medical opinions based on my training and experience. I did not perform procedures, prescribe medications, or represent myself as a licensed physician. Yet you influenced treatment decisions. I offered information. Dr. Mitchell and other physicians made the actual decisions. Hunt leaned forward. Walker has a documented history of medical error resulting in patient death. He fled Boston rather than face consequences. Now he's here unlicensed playing doctor with our patients. If something goes wrong, this hospital faces massive liability. The door opened. Sarah Mitchell entered, followed by a group Daniel hadn't expected, Mrs. Chen, Emma's mother, holding her daughter's hand. The girl looked healthy, bright-eyed, a second grader who'd survived what should have killed her. Mr. and Mrs. Turner with Sophia between them. The teenager's vision had fully recovered after steroid treatment. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, Jake's parents, their son still hospitalized but stable. And Ashley Morgan, with her mother, both having flown from San Diego specifically for this meeting. Patricia's eyebrows rose. This is highly irregular. Mrs. Chen spoke first, her voice shaking but determined. My daughter would be dead if Mr. Walker hadn't spoken up. 8 doctors missed it. Only he saw the truth. I don't care about his license status. I care that my Emma is alive. Sophia stepped forward, her teenage confidence emerging. Dr. Hunt wanted to cut into my brain. Mr. Walker said it wasn't necessary. He was right. I'm fine now. No surgery. If the hospital punishes him for saving me, then something's wrong with this hospital. Mrs. Morrison's voice held the steady strength of someone who'd survived genuine crisis. My husband's a mechanic. I'm a nurse. We're regular people. When Jake collapsed, we thought we'd lost him. Mr. Walker saw what your code team didn't. He sacrificed his exam, his certification timeline to save our son. You want to fire him for that? Ashley's mother spoke last. I'm Emily Morgan from San Diego. My daughter is best friends with Mr. Walker's daughter, Chloe. When Ashley got sick, Mr. Walker diagnosed her in the middle of the night. He'd already walked away from medicine. He could have stayed home, but he didn't. He came. He saved her. Her voice broke slightly. This man has spent 10 years punishing himself for one mistake. Don't punish him for doing what he's meant to do. Hunt's face had gone from smug to pale. Rodriguez stood. I'd like to add something. Last week I offered Dr. Walker the position of Chief of Diagnostic Medicine. Full-time, $200,000 a year. He turned it down. The board members exchanged glances. Why would he refuse that? Because he only wants to work 20 hours a week. He has a daughter in California. He wants time for Sunday video calls, for being present in her life. He told me, and I quote, "I need time with my daughter. That matters more than any job." Patricia leaned back, considering. So we have a maintenance worker who refuses promotion to maintain work-life balance, who has saved 3 children's lives in 2 weeks, who sacrificed his certification exam to help during a code, and who's being accused of practicing medicine illegally by the physician whose misdiagnosis he corrected. She turned to Hunt. Dr. Hunt, your complaint raises valid legal concerns. However, I'm troubled by the pattern here. You diagnosed Emma Chen with epilepsy when it was allergic encephalitis. You recommended brain surgery for Sophia Turner when she needed steroids. You're making this complaint 3 days after Mr. Walker prevented what would have been a significant medical error on your part. Hunt's jaw tightened. I resent the implication that I'm acting out of wounded pride. Then let me be direct. We've received complaints about your conduct with residents. 12 formal grievances in 18 months. 7 residents have requested transfer out of neurology. Your diagnostic accuracy on complex cases has fallen below departmental standards. Patricia pulled out a folder. We were already conducting a performance review. Mr. Walker's involvement simply brought existing issues to light. The room fell silent. Here's my decision. Mr. Walker will be promoted to part-time Director of Diagnostic Medicine effective immediately. 25 hours per week flexible scheduling. He'll review complex cases and teach residents. Dr. Hunt, you're suspended pending investigation into the Turner case and resident complaints. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Daniel left the meeting in a state of shock, his mind struggling to process the reversal. Rodriguez caught up with him in the hallway. You're not a janitor anymore. I'm not licensed yet. I still have 52 hours of CME to complete. Which you'll do. But starting tomorrow, you're on medical staff. Part-time director of a new department. We'll build it around you. What if I fail? What if I miss something and someone gets hurt? Then we'll handle it. That's what malpractice insurance is for. That's what peer review exists for. Medicine isn't about perfection, Daniel. It's about showing up and doing your best. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a calculator and a calendar mapping out the remaining CME hours against his new schedule. 52 hours in 56 days, just under an hour per day. Manageable if barely. His phone buzzed. Sarah. Study group tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Me, Brian Chen, Rachel Foster. We're all doing CME. Thought you might want to join. The offer represented something he'd never accepted before: help. Collaboration. The acknowledgement that he didn't have to do everything alone. I'll be there. Sarah's response came immediately. Good. Also, you should know, I looked up your father. The firefighter who died in the North Tower. I wanted to understand where you learned to run toward danger instead of away from it. Daniel stared at the message, confused. My father was an accountant. Died when I was 12. Heart attack. Then I was wrong. But whoever taught you, they taught you right. He didn't correct her confusion. Instead, he thought about her earlier story about her father running into the burning tower. About the choice to help when you could have walked away. Maybe the lesson wasn't about where you learned it. Maybe it was about choosing to act despite the fear. The study group met in the hospital library, a quiet space with medical texts lining the walls and comfortable chairs arranged around a conference table. Sarah arrived with coffee. Brian Chen brought snacks. Rachel Foster had created a shared study guide. For 4 hours they worked through CME modules together, testing each other, explaining concepts, making what should have been solitary drudgery into something almost enjoyable. Around midnight, Rachel packed up her materials. This is how it should work. Collaboration instead of competition. Learning together instead of suffering alone. Sarah nodded. Medical school taught us to fight for rank. Residency taught us to survive on our own. Nobody teaches us to ask for help, to admit we don't know everything. Daniel heard himself speaking before conscious thought formed the words. Strength isn't never needing help. Strength is knowing when to ask for it. The silence that followed felt heavy with recognition. Sarah smiled. That's going to be your teaching philosophy, isn't it, when you start training residents? If I start training residents. When, not if. You're going to be good at this, Daniel. You're going to teach them what the rest of us forgot somewhere along the way. By the time Daniel returned to his apartment, it was 1:47 a.m. He'd completed 6 additional hours of CME, bringing his total to 18 hours with 55 days remaining. The math had shifted from impossible to merely difficult. His phone showed a new email. From the Connecticut Medical Board. Subject line, License Reinstatement Status Update. Dr. Walker. Based on review of your compliance with probation requirements and continuing education progress, the board has approved early conditional reinstatement. Your medical license is now active subject to continued supervision by Dr. Rodriguez and completion of remaining CME hours within the 60-day window. Congratulations on your return to practice. Dr. Barbara Whitmore. Daniel read the email 3 times, the words blurring as exhaustion and emotion combined. He was a doctor again. Not a janitor who used to be a doctor. Not someone hiding from his past. A physician licensed and practicing with all the responsibility and terror that entailed. And somewhere in Boston, Tyler Brennan remained dead. That fact hadn't changed. The guilt hadn't evaporated. The knowledge of his failure still lived in his chest like a shard of glass. But maybe Rodriguez was right. Maybe honoring Tyler's memory wasn't about endless self-punishment. Maybe it was about using what he'd learned from both his successes and his catastrophic failure to help the people he could still save. His phone buzzed one final time. Chloe, though it was nearly 2 a.m. in California. Dad, I can't sleep. Are you awake? I'm awake. I've been thinking. I want to study medicine, but not the way you did it before. I want to be good at my work and have a life. Can that work? Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering all the ways to answer. Finally he typed, yes, it can work, but you have to choose it every day. You have to set boundaries and protect them. You have to remember that being a great doctor means nothing if you sacrifice everything else to get there. Is that what you're doing now? Choosing balance. I'm trying. Some days better than others. That's all anyone can do, Dad. Try. Keep trying. Don't give up. Her wisdom, drawn from 15 years of watching him struggle, felt like a gift he didn't deserve. I love you, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never. You're my dad, even when you're being stupid. He laughed, despite the exhaustion weighing on him. Fair enough. Get some sleep. School tomorrow. You too. Doctor stuff tomorrow. Doctor stuff. The casual phrase carried a weight that Chloe couldn't fully understand. Tomorrow he'd walk into Riverside Medical Center not as maintenance staff, but as director of diagnostic medicine. Tomorrow lives would depend on his judgment. Tomorrow the past would stop being something to hide from and become foundation to build on. Tomorrow he'd find out if redemption was something you earned or something you chose one decision at a time. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. November sun cutting through Hartford's cold air as Daniel drove to Riverside Medical Center for the first time as medical staff rather than maintenance. The ID badge Rodriguez handed him at 8:47 a.m. read Director of Diagnostic Medicine, the title both validating and terrifying in equal measure. Sarah met him outside Conference Room 3B with a stack of patient files. "Welcome to your new office. It's not much, but it has windows." The space was modest, furnished with a desk, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard that had seen better days. But the windows overlooked the Connecticut River, and the quiet isolation felt like luxury after years of supply closets and maintenance offices. First case briefing is in 20 minutes. 3 residents rotating through your service this month. They're nervous about working with the legend who saved 3 kids in 2 weeks. "I'm not a legend. I'm just someone who got lucky." Keep telling yourself that. Sarah dropped the files on his desk. "Your first teaching round is Wednesday at 1 p.m. Rodriguez wants you to lead grand rounds next month, and the CME coordinator needs your updated timeline." The weight of responsibility settled over him like a physical thing. This wasn't consulting from the shadows. This was being visible, accountable, responsible for outcomes. His phone buzzed. A text from the CME portal, remaining hours 42, days remaining 54, current pace on track, small victories. Yeah. The 3 residents assigned to diagnostic medicine carried themselves with the particular blend of exhaustion and ambition that Daniel recognized from his own training years. Brian Chen from UCLA, brilliant but defensive. Rachel Foster from Cornell, meticulous to the point of paralysis. And Marcus Webb from University of Virginia, confident bordering on arrogant. They assembled in the conference room at 9:05 a.m., their body language broadcasting skepticism. Marcus spoke first. "So we're supposed to learn from someone who hasn't practiced in 10 years. Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "You're supposed to learn from someone who made catastrophic mistakes and survived them, who knows what burnout looks like from the inside, who can teach you diagnostic patterns but also how to maintain boundaries so you don't destroy yourself pursuing perfection." The room went quiet. "Here's how this works. We review complex cases together. I don't have all the answers. When I don't know something, I say so. When you don't know something, you say so. No pretending, no protecting egos. Questions." Rachel raised her hand tentatively. "Dr. Hunt told us you killed a patient through negligence, that you ran away instead of facing consequences." The directness of it was refreshing compared to the careful avoidance most people practiced. "Tyler Brennan, 19 years old, MIT student. Recurring headaches. I ordered a CT scan, saw an ambiguous shadow, documented it, but concluded it was artifact. 3 weeks later he collapsed. Brain tumor stage 4, dead within 10 days. I was cleared of malpractice, but I knew the truth. I'd missed it because I was running on empty, drinking too much, barely functioning after my divorce. So yes, I made a fatal error. And yes, I walked away because I couldn't trust myself anymore." Brian's skepticism had shifted to something else. Why come back? Because hiding doesn't honor his memory. Because Emma Chen and Ashley Morgan and Sophia Turner and Jake Morrison deserve to live. Because my daughter asked me why I was wasting my gifts. Marcus's arrogance had deflated slightly. "What do you want from us? Learn to see patterns. Learn to question assumptions. Learn that being wrong doesn't make you a bad doctor. It makes you human. And learn to go home at reasonable hours instead of killing yourself to prove something that doesn't need proving." The first case they reviewed involved a 12-year-old with unexplained weight loss and fatigue. Rachel presented the workup, her voice steady but uncertain. Standard metabolic panel was normal. We're thinking chronic infection or possible malignancy. Daniel studied the labs on the screen. Did anyone check cortisol levels? No. Why would we? Because the timing of her fatigue correlates with stress events. And look at her sodium. It's low normal. Not pathological, but combined with the pattern of symptoms, it suggests possible adrenal insufficiency. Run a cortisol stimulation test. Brian pulled up reference materials. Addison's disease. I didn't even consider it. It's so rare. Rare doesn't mean impossible. When common diagnoses don't fit, start thinking about the uncommon ones methodically. Don't jump to zebras, but don't ignore them either. The test confirmed Addison's disease. The 12-year-old started hormone replacement therapy and improved dramatically within days. Rachel approached Daniel after the session, her expression thoughtful. "You made that look easy. Saw the pattern in 30 seconds. I've seen it before. You haven't. That's the only difference. Give yourself time to build the pattern library." Dr. Hunt never taught us that way. He expected us to know things we couldn't possibly know yet. Hunt teaches through intimidation. I'm trying something different. Wednesday's grand teaching rounds drew an audience of 27 physicians, residents, and medical students. Daniel stood at the front of the auditorium, his first formal teaching session in a decade, and felt the familiar anxiety of performance mixing with something newer purpose. The case he'd chosen was Sophia Turner, the 14-year-old who'd nearly undergone unnecessary brain surgery. Patient presented with progressive headaches and vision loss. Initial differential included tumor, which seemed supported by MRI findings, but several details didn't fit the tumor hypothesis. He pulled up the imaging, highlighting the specific pattern of pituitary swelling. First, the symmetry was wrong. Tumors rarely present this evenly. Second, her hormone disruption showed a pattern more consistent with inflammation than mass effect. Third, her age and sex put her in the demographic for lymphocytic hypophysitis, an autoimmune condition that mimics tumor. A hand went up in the back. A senior resident Daniel didn't recognize. But imaging can't definitively distinguish hypophysitis from adenoma. How do you justify delaying surgery based on a hunch? You run definitive tests, hormone panel to confirm the inflammatory pattern. If results support hypophysitis, you treat medically and reserve surgery as backup if medication fails. The question isn't whether to treat, it's whether to start with the most invasive option or the most conservative. Another hand. What if you're wrong? What if it is tumor and delays make it worse? Then you were wrong. You adjust. You own the mistake. But you made a thoughtful decision based on evidence rather than jumping to the intervention that feels most decisive. Sarah spoke from the front row. The key word there is thoughtful. Dr. Walker didn't refuse surgery out of ego. He suggested an alternative with clear testing criteria. When the tests confirmed his hypothesis, surgery became unnecessary. That's good medicine. The teaching round continued for 90 minutes. Daniel fielding questions about diagnostic reasoning, about managing uncertainty, about the difference between confidence and arrogance. Afterward, several residents approached with questions that went beyond the case material. How do you maintain work-life balance? Everyone says it's important, but nobody actually does it. Daniel considered the question, thinking about Chloe's Sunday calls about the reinstatement requirements forcing him to pace himself. You decide what matters most and protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. For me, that's Sunday evenings with my daughter. I don't schedule anything then, ever. You find your non-negotiables and build boundaries around them. But what if there's an emergency? Then someone else handles it. You're not the only doctor in the hospital. The system doesn't collapse because you went home on time. The resident looked skeptical, but thoughtful. 6 months passed in a rhythm that felt simultaneously sustainable and precarious. Daniel completed his CME requirements within the 60-day window, working through material in collaboration with Sarah's study group rather than alone. The probationary period progressed without incident, Rodriguez's supervision evolving from oversight to mentorship. The diagnostic medicine department grew from Daniel and 3 rotating residents to a small team with dedicated support staff. They consulted on 63 complex cases in that first 6 months. 61 resulted in correct diagnoses. 2 required referral to specialists when Daniel admitted uncertainty rather than guessing. 0 malpractice complaints. 0 patient safety incidents. 98% satisfaction rating from both patients and referring physicians. The numbers looked good on paper, but Daniel knew they represented something more fragile than institutional metrics could capture. Each case carried the weight of potential failure. Each decision echoed with memories of Tyler Brennan. Hunt's suspension had become termination after the investigation uncovered a pattern of diagnostic errors and resident abuse. He'd left Connecticut entirely, taking a position at a smaller hospital in Vermont. The neurology department, now under new leadership, functioned with markedly improved morale. But success didn't erase the past. It just made the present more bearable. Spring arrived with the tentative warmth of New England in April, and with it came an unexpected visitor. Daniel was reviewing labs in his office when Sarah knocked, her expression unreadable. "Someone here to see you. She says it's important." The woman who entered was in her late 50s, her face lined with grief that time had softened but not erased. Daniel recognized her immediately despite a decade of separation. Mrs. Brennan, Tyler's mother. His throat constricted. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "I can leave." "No. Please. Sit." She settled into the chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap with careful composure. "I've been following your work. Articles about the janitor turned doctor who's saving lives in Connecticut. It took me a while to realize it was you." "Mrs. Brennan, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry will never be enough. I didn't come for apologies. I came because I've spent 10 years being angry at you, blaming you for Tyler's death, and that anger was destroying me more than it ever affected you." The silence between them felt bottomless. "I spoke with a grief counselor last year. She helped me understand something. Tyler's death wasn't entirely your fault. The tumor was aggressive. Even if you'd caught it 3 weeks earlier, his prognosis was poor. Maybe he'd have lived months longer. Maybe not. I should have caught it. That's what haunts me." "Yes, you should have. But you were human. You were burned out. You made a mistake." Her voice cracked slightly. "And then you punished yourself by walking away from medicine for 10 years. You stopped helping people because my son died. That doesn't honor Tyler. It just ensures more people suffered because you weren't there." Daniel's eyes burned. "I couldn't trust myself. What if I failed again?" "Then you'd fail, like every doctor who ever practiced. But you'd also save people, like Emma Chen, like all the patients I read about in the articles." Mrs. Brennan reached into her purse, pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. "This girl, Sophia Turner, 14 years old. She'd be brain damaged or dead if you hadn't spoken up. Her mother wrote a letter to the Hartford Courant thanking you by name." The clipping showed a photo of Sophia healthy and smiling alongside her mother's editorial about the doctor who'd saved her daughter from unnecessary surgery. "Tyler wanted to be a doctor. Did you know that?" Daniel shook his head. "He was studying engineering but planned to switch to pre-med junior year. Wanted to do research, maybe neurology. He thought you were the smartest person he'd ever met. Talked about you constantly that semester." The information landed like a physical blow. "I didn't know." "He admired you, trusted you completely. And yes, you failed him. But he wouldn't want you to spend your life hiding from medicine because of that failure. He'd want you doing exactly what you're doing now. Saving people, teaching residents, making sure other doctors don't make the mistakes you made." Mrs. Brennan stood, extending her hand. "I forgive you, Dr. Walker. 10 years too late, maybe. But I forgive you, and I think you should forgive yourself." After she left, Daniel sat motionless for 20 minutes, the newspaper clipping on his desk beside a photograph of Chloe. Two lives intersecting across a decade of guilt and grief, offering a message he'd been too afraid to hear. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about allowing the future to exist alongside the past. Summer brought Chloe's first visit to Connecticut in 3 years. Daniel picked her up from Bradley International Airport on a Thursday afternoon, his heart hammering as she emerged from baggage claim. 16, now taller, her face losing childhood softness and gaining the angles of young adulthood, but her smile when she saw him was pure and uncomplicated. "Dad." The hug lasted long enough to make other travelers navigate around them. "You look different. Happy." "I'm trying to be." She pulled back, studying his face. It's working. The tour of Riverside Medical Center took most of Friday. Sarah greeted Chloe with enthusiasm, showing her the diagnostic medicine department, introducing her to residents who treated Daniel's daughter like visiting royalty. Your dad's kind of famous here. The residents call him Dr. Truth because he admits when he doesn't know something. Apparently that's revolutionary. Chloe beamed with pride that made Daniel's chest ache. They visited patients Daniel had treated. Emma Chen, now 8 years old, attending 3rd grade and thriving. Sophia Turner, 15, preparing for her sophomore year with perfect vision and no lingering effects from the inflammation that had nearly cost her brain surgery. Jake Morrison stopped by on crutches, his basketball career on hold, but his heart stable with medication management. Your dad saved my life. I was dead. Heart stopped. He brought me back. Chloe's eyes shone with tears. He's good at that. Saturday morning, Daniel drove them to Boston, 2 hours north through Massachusetts' spring countryside. The cemetery where Tyler Brennan was buried occupied a quiet hillside in Cambridge oak trees, providing shade over rows of granite headstones. Daniel had never visited, had never allowed himself this confrontation with physical evidence of his failure. But Mrs. Brennan's visit had shifted something, creating space for grief that wasn't purely self-punishment. Tyler's headstone was simple. Name dates a quote about reaching for stars. Chloe stood beside her father, her hand finding his. Mom told me about him, about what happened. I should have saved him. Maybe. But you've saved 61 other people in the last 6 months. If you'd stayed hidden, they'd be dead or damaged. Tyler wouldn't want that. The wisdom in her words, drawn from 16 years of watching him struggle, felt like a gift. How'd you get so smart? Good genes, and a dad who taught me that mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does. Daniel knelt, placing flowers on the grave. I'm sorry, Tyler, for failing you, for running away, for taking so long to come back. His voice cracked. I'll do better. I promise. Chloe knelt beside him, her arm around his shoulders. You don't have to change the past, Dad. You just have to create a better future. That's what Tyler would want. The formal ceremony celebrating Riverside Medical Center's first year of diagnostic medicine programming took place in October, the hospital's grand ballroom filled with staff board members and patients whose lives had intersected with the department. Daniel stood at a podium looking out at faces that represented the past year's journey. Rodriguez in the front row, smiling with satisfaction. Sarah beside him, now promoted to associate director. The 3 residents who'd rotated through, now confident young physicians. Mrs. Brennan, who'd traveled from Boston specifically for this event, and Chloe visiting for fall break, her pride visible even from across the room. The board chair presented statistics. 127 complex cases, 124 correct diagnoses, 3 requiring specialist referral, 0 malpractice complaints, 6 lives saved directly, 89 lives significantly improved through correct diagnosis, preventing unnecessary procedures. Dr. Walker has built something extraordinary here. Not just a department, but a teaching philosophy. His residents consistently rate him as the most impactful instructor in their training. He models intellectual humility, diagnostic rigor, and sustainable practice. Please join me in recognizing his contributions. The applause felt overwhelming. Daniel gripped the podium, gathering thoughts that had been forming for months. 10 years ago, I thought my career was finished. I'd made a devastating mistake. A patient died, and I convinced myself that the only honorable response was to walk away from medicine entirely. The room was silent. I was wrong. Walking away didn't honor Tyler Brennan's memory. It didn't prevent future mistakes. It just ensured that all the people I could have helped never got that chance. Hiding from failure isn't the same as learning from it. He paused, finding Chloe in the crowd. My daughter asked me once why I was wasting my gifts. At the time, I thought I was protecting patients from my incompetence. But really, I was protecting myself from the possibility of failure. And in doing so, I guaranteed that I'd never succeed either. Mrs. Brennan nodded, tears visible even from the podium. Here's what I've learned this year. We're not defined by our worst mistakes. We're defined by what we do after we make them. Do we run? Do we hide? Or do we face what we've done, learn from it, and try to do better? The words felt both insufficient and essential. Thank you all for giving me the chance to try again, for trusting me despite my past, for believing that redemption is possible even after catastrophic failure. The standing ovation that followed felt unearned, but Daniel accepted it with as much grace as he could manage. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and conversations. Patients thanked him. Colleagues congratulated him. Medical students asked about training opportunities. But the moment that mattered most came when Mrs. Brennan approached her expression peaceful in a way he'd never seen during their limited interactions. Tyler would be proud of what you've built, of what you're teaching. I wish I could have saved him. So do I. But you're saving others in his name. That's the best any of us can do. Take our pain and transform it into something that helps people. After she left, Chloe found him standing alone by the windows overlooking downtown Hartford. You okay, Dad? I think so. For the first time in a long time, I think I actually am. She took his hand, her grip firm and grounding. I've been thinking about medical school, about following in your footsteps, but not the 80-hour-week version, the balanced version, the one where you're a great doctor and a present father. Is that possible? You're proving it is. 25 hours a week. Boundaries you actually maintain. Home for Sunday calls. That's the model I want to follow. Pride and terror mixed in his chest. Medicine is harder than it looks. The responsibility, the weight of decisions, the knowledge that you'll make mistakes, and people might suffer for them. I know. But you taught me something important. Mistakes don't make you a bad doctor. They make you human. What matters is owning them, learning from them, doing better next time. The wisdom he'd tried so hard to model was being reflected back at him, proof that perhaps the lessons had landed. You'll be an incredible physician. Thanks, Dad, but first I need to finish high school, she grinned. Want to get dinner? I'm starving. They left the reception together, father and daughter walking through Hartford's streets as autumn darkness settled over the city. Kate. Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks later. Daniel's phone rang during a teaching session, unknown number which he normally ignored, but something made him answer. Dr. Walker. This is Barbara Whitmore from the Connecticut Medical Board. I'm calling to inform you that your probationary period has been successfully completed. Your license is now fully reinstated without restrictions. Congratulations. The relief was physical tension he'd been carrying for months, finally releasing. That evening, Rodriguez called him into the administrative office. The board wants to expand diagnostic medicine. Double your hours, bring on 2 more attendings, create a formal fellowship program. I can't do more than 25 hours. I told you that from the beginning. I know. That's why I'm asking if you'd be willing to direct the expansion while maintaining your current schedule. Hire the attendings, design the fellowship, oversee the program, but still work your same 25 hours clinically. The opportunity was enormous. A chance to influence how diagnostic medicine would be taught, to build a program that prioritized both excellence and sustainability. What about Hunt's replacement in neurology? Won't they object to diagnostic medicine expanding? Dr. Jennifer Sato took over neurology in August. She's Harvard-trained, brilliant, and explicitly supportive of collaborative care. She thinks diagnostic medicine makes her job easier by catching complex cases before they become disasters. Daniel considered the offer, weighing ambition against the boundaries he'd fought so hard to establish. I'll do it, but I need ironclad protection for the 25-hour limit. No exceptions, no emergency additions, no gradual scope creep. If I start sliding back toward 60-hour weeks, I stop being effective. History proves that. Agreed. We'll put it in writing. The following Sunday, Chloe called at 7 p.m. exactly, her face filling his laptop screen with the familiar comfort of routine maintained across thousands of miles. "Hey, Dad, guess what? You won the lottery and you're quitting school to become a professional surfer." She laughed. "No, but I got early acceptance to Yale, full scholarship. They want me to join their pre-med program." The pride that surged through him was almost overwhelming. "That's incredible, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to do it right, though. Not the way you did it the first time. I'm going to study hard, but also have friends. I'm going to volunteer, but also sleep. I'm going to be a great student and a whole person." "You already are a whole person. Don't let medicine change that." "It won't, because I have you showing me how to do both." After they hung up, Daniel sat in the quiet of his apartment, reflecting on the strange architecture of redemption. How failure could become foundation. How guilt could transform into purpose. How the worst mistake of your life could teach lessons that saved others. His phone buzzed. Sarah with a case that had stumped the ER. 10-year-old fever and confusion. Neurology is baffled. Can you take a look? A year ago he would have ignored it, would have stayed hidden protecting himself from the possibility of being wrong. Now he grabbed his keys. On my way. The drive to Riverside took 8 minutes. The ER was controlled chaos when he arrived, but the familiarity of it felt like coming home rather than stepping into danger. The 10-year-old was a boy named Marcus, his parents frantic as they watched him decline despite antibiotics and supportive care. Daniel reviewed the chart, examined the child, ran through differential diagnoses with the ER attending. When did the fever start? 3 days ago. He'd been hiking with his father in western Connecticut the week before. "We thought maybe Lyme disease, but the tests were negative." "Any tick bites?" His father found one and removed it, but Lyme tests were negative. Daniel's mind clicked through possibilities. What about other tick-borne illnesses? Babesiosis, anaplasmosis, ehrlichiosis? The timing and presentation fit, and they're rarer than Lyme, so they're easy to miss if you're not specifically looking. The tests came back positive for babesiosis within 2 hours. Treatment started immediately. Marcus began improving by morning. His parents found Daniel in the hallway at 2:47 a.m. "Dr. Mitchell said you figured it out, that our son could have died if you hadn't been here." "Dr. Mitchell would have gotten there eventually. I just sped up the process." "But you came in the middle of the night, on your day off. That's beyond job requirements." Daniel thought about Tyler Brennan, about Emma Chen and Ashley Morgan and Sophia Turner and Jake Morrison and now Marcus, about all the lives that intersected with his, some saved, one tragically lost. It's what doctors do. We show up, we try our best. Sometimes we fail, but we keep showing up anyway. The father's handshake was firm. "Thank you for showing up tonight." 18 months after Daniel's return to medicine, Riverside Medical Center's Diagnostic Medicine Department had become a national model. The fellowship program attracted candidates from across the country. The teaching methodology Daniel had developed, emphasizing intellectual humility and sustainable practice, was being adopted by other institutions. Medical journals published articles about the program's success. Conference invitations arrived regularly. Consulting requests from other hospitals seeking to build similar departments. But the measure that mattered most to Daniel was simpler. He made every Sunday call with Chloe. Never missed one. Never let work encroach on that protected time. The boundaries he'd established held firm through expansion, through program growth, through the inevitable pressures to do more, take on more sacrifice, more. On a Tuesday in March, Sarah knocked on his office door with unusual formality. "There's someone here to see you." She doesn't have an appointment, but she insisted. The woman who entered was in her 30s, professionally dressed, her face carrying echoes of someone Daniel had known a lifetime ago. "Dr. Walker, I'm Jennifer Brennan, Tyler's sister." Daniel stood uncertain what this visit would bring. "I didn't know Tyler had a sister. I was away at graduate school when he died." living in California. I didn't come back for the funeral. Couldn't face it. She settled into the chair across from him. I've regretted that for 10 years. I'm sorry for your loss. My mother told me about her visit, about forgiving you. I thought she was crazy. How could she forgive the doctor who killed her son? The directness was startling. I understand if you're still angry. I was, for years. But then I started following your work. Read about your teaching philosophy, about the emphasis on admitting uncertainty, about sustainable practice preventing burnout. Jennifer pulled out a folder. I'm a medical educator at Stanford. I've been studying physician wellness and burnout prevention. Your model is exactly what I've been advocating for. She opened the folder showing research data on resident burnout physicians' suicide rates, medical errors correlated with exhaustion. Tyler died because the system is broken, because we train doctors to work impossible hours, to never admit weakness, to sacrifice everything for the job. You were a victim of that system as much as Tyler was. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, but it contextualizes it. And what you're doing now, teaching residents that it's okay to say, I don't know, that going home on time isn't weakness, that boundaries are essential. You're fixing the system that broke you. You're preventing future doctors from making the mistakes that killed my brother. The perspective shift was dizzying. I never thought about it that way. My mother forgave you because she needed peace. I'm here because I want to collaborate. I'd like to study your program, maybe write a paper together on sustainable diagnostic medicine. Use Tyler's story to help change medical education. The opportunity to transform personal tragedy into systemic improvement felt like the redemption Daniel had been seeking without knowing how to name it. I'd be honored. No. The collaboration with Jennifer Brennan evolved into something neither of them expected: friendship. They spent months documenting the diagnostic medicine program's approach, analyzing outcomes, interviewing residents about how the model affected their well-being and clinical performance. The resulting paper, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, was titled Diagnostic Excellence Through Sustainable Practice, a Model for Preventing Physician Burnout While Improving Patient Care. The acknowledgments section included a dedication in memory of Tyler Brennan, whose death taught us that the system must change. The paper's impact rippled through medical education. Teaching hospitals across the country began implementing similar models. Residency programs started emphasizing boundaries and sustainability alongside clinical excellence. Letters arrived from physicians who'd been on the verge of burnout, thanking Daniel for giving them permission to practice differently. From residents who felt less alone in their struggles. From patients whose doctors had learned to admit uncertainty rather than guessing. But the letter that meant most came from Mrs. Brennan, handwritten on cream stationery. Dear Daniel, Tyler would be so proud, not just of what you've accomplished, but of your courage in facing what happened and transforming it into something that helps others. You've given meaning to his death that I never thought possible. Thank you for honoring my son's memory by becoming the doctor he believed you could be. With gratitude and peace, Catherine Brennan. Chloe's graduation from high school came in June, Daniel flying to San Diego for the ceremony. She delivered the valedictorian speech, her words about resilience and growth and learning from failure clearly influenced by watching her father's journey. We're taught that mistakes are failures, that errors define us. But I've learned something different from someone important to me. Mistakes are only failures if we refuse to learn from them. They only define us if we let them. She found his eyes in the crowd. My dad made a terrible mistake once. It haunted him for years. But he didn't let it destroy him. He learned from it. He came back stronger. He built something beautiful from the wreckage. And in doing so, he taught me that redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try again after you've failed. The applause that followed was thunderous, but all Daniel heard was his daughter's voice carrying lessons he'd struggled to learn across years of exile and self-punishment. That evening, over celebratory dinner, Chloe announced her plans. Yale pre-med in the fall, then medical school hopefully, pediatrics eventually like you, but I'm going to do it differently. 40 hours a week maximum. Boundaries from day one. Excellence without self-destruction. Laura, sitting across the table, smiled at Daniel. She learned from the best, both your mistakes and your recovery. The acknowledgement felt like absolution from an unexpected source. The final Sunday in August, Daniel sat in his Hartford apartment waiting for Chloe's call. She was moving into her Yale dorm, beginning the journey toward medicine that would define her next decade. She appeared on screen at 7 p.m., exactly her new dorm room visible behind her. Made it. Roommate seems cool. Classes start Wednesday. I'm terrified. That's normal. Everyone's terrified. Were you, when you started? Absolutely. But I made the mistake of hiding the fear, pretending I knew more than I did. Don't do that. It's okay to be scared and uncertain. It's honest. That's what you always say. Strength isn't never needing help. It's knowing when to ask for it. The words he'd spoken months ago in a study session captured and remembered and claimed as wisdom worth keeping. You're going to be incredible. Thanks, Dad, for everything. For showing me that you can fail spectacularly and still build something meaningful. For teaching me that second chances are real. For proving that you don't have to choose between being good at your work and being present in your life. After they hung up, Daniel sat in the quiet reflecting on distance traveled. From the janitor who couldn't stay silent to the director of a program changing medical education. From the man drowning in guilt to someone who'd learned to carry grief without letting it define him. His phone buzzed. The hospital. A complex case that had the residents stumped. Once he would have resented the interruption. Now he grabbed his keys with something approaching eagerness. The work wasn't punishment anymore. It was purpose. And the difference made all the distance in the world. 3 years later, the diagnostic medicine program had expanded to satellite locations across New England. The fellowship had graduated 37 physicians who carried the model of sustainable excellence to institutions nationwide. Chloe was thriving at Yale, maintaining perfect grades, while also joining clubs, making friends, living the balanced life she'd promised. And Daniel Walker, age 43, sat in his office reviewing a consultation request, his life measured in weekly hours that never exceeded 25, in Sunday calls that never went unanswered, in patients saved and residents taught and boundaries maintained. The photograph of Tyler Brennan sat on his desk, now alongside pictures of Chloe and the patients he'd helped save. A reminder that the past and future could coexist, that failure and redemption weren't opposites, but parts of the same continuous journey. His office phone rang. Sarah from the ER. 12-year-old with neurological symptoms. Nobody can figure it out. You available? Always. The walk to the ER carried familiar weight responsibility that no longer felt crushing, but purposeful. He was a doctor. Imperfect, scarred by past mistakes, but present and trying and occasionally getting it right. And in the end, perhaps that was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it alongside joy. Not the erasure of failure, but the courage to keep trying despite it. The 12-year-old waited. The diagnosis beckoned, and Daniel Walker, who'd once hidden from medicine for a decade, walked toward both with steady purpose and hard-won peace. He'd spent years running from who he was. Now he spent his days becoming who he was meant to be all along. Not perfect, not invincible, but present. And that finally was enough.